back to channel Space Moose. Today I'm going to show you sets from series Classic Space which were available in 1980. There's not as many of them as the previous year, but the previous year was starting year, so obviously there must have been more sets. In 1980 there was only 5 of them, but they were quite interesting. If speaking about new pieces that appeared that year, there's also not many of them. One of the novelties for the Classic Space was this type of hinged arm. It was not new part for Lego, because this type of parts were around for almost 10 years. They were used as arms for early figures. They were also called maxi figures. But here for the first time they were used as mechanical arms equipped with digger bucket. Another novelty was that previous year windows in bases were made from transparent bricks. In 1980 you got proper windows with glass. Smaller size and bigger size. Another novelty was a big sloped piece with Classic Space emblem. And what is interesting, this type of piece was only used in 2 sets, and that was one of them. So we can start showing the sets in details. The sets numbers changed that year. In 1979 sets numbers were 3 digits. Since 1980 they switched to 4-digit numbers, and space sets got numbers starting with 67, 68 and 69. So the smallest set was 6821. It was very similar to the basic rover, but it was slightly higher because it had to accommodate the big piece, which was the hinge for the mechanical arm with the digger bucket. And because of the bucket in the front, there was no space for the air tanks. The driver had a computer behind him and the radio to communicate with his friends. And one of the odd things is that all base plates, base plates like crater plates and landing plates, they were all grey, but for some reason the material which was dug out by the digger was yellow. The next set was also a rover, slightly bigger, 3-axle rover with red driver. And there was an anecdote that, as you noticed, initially only 2 colors of space suits were available, white and red. There were some speculations that white spaceman was supposed to represent American astronauts and red one was to represent Soviet cosmonauts, but there was nobody could confirm or deny it. The rover was specialized probably for some mineral detectors, the detection, because of big radars on the hinged arms in the front. Next set was 6861. It was a kind of interceptor fighter, not very large craft, but with very powerful engines for its size. Red astronaut as a pilot. Of course there's Classic Space emblem in the front. Very interesting design. Next set was another rover, but this time it was huge by standards back then. It was 6 stood wide actually 8 at its base. It had 6 wheels, but with a little bit of imagination you could treat them as tracks. And it was almost airtight. The only gap was here in the front. This could have been sorted with adding 1 extra transparent bricks, but for some reason it hasn't been done. The crew was 2 spacemen, red and white, and inside the rover there was space for both of them. But it wasn't very comfortable because there was no seats inside. As equipment they had a radio for communications and a spanner in case of a breakdown. And the biggest and obviously the most interesting set in year 1980 was a moon base, which was called Beta 1 Space Base. An interesting fact about this set is that this was the only moon base where there was any sleeping quarters for the crew. You can see there's two beds for the crew, resting area with swivel chairs, table and a mug for coffee or whatever drink they had in space. Astronauts inside the base could take off their air tanks. There was 2 hangars for air tanks in there. One of the unique parts for this set was the big printed brick inside. It was similar to the one from the set 926, but the print was different. It was showing a rocket, probably from the set 920, and an astronaut watching it. Another very interesting thing about this set was that it had a kind of prototype for the monorail. Monorail will come back a few years later in a much more interesting form, but this was the first attempt to make something like this in Lego. The monorail could be used to transport pilot from the resting area to the launch pad, where there was another fighter interceptor ready to start. It was similar in size to the one from the set 6861, also with red pilot. Very similar engines, but with slightly different colors. And again, no seat, so it couldn't be very comfortable for the pilot. And the windshield, for some reason it was too low to protect the pilot. But the overall design was very cool. So that's about this. Oh, one more thing. The base was also equipped with a rover, identical to the basic rovers from the previous year, with the air tanks in the front, and again, white spaceman as the driver. So that was the sets from 1980, only 5 that year, but very interesting in my opinion. So we'll see you in the next episode where we'll show you the sets from the year 1981.